I want to talk to you about Pro Wrestling USA because it's one of the most interesting and least discussed occurrences in my lifetime, being a lifelong wrestling fan. Let's go back to 1984 and talk about the landscape a little bit, what was going on. Specific to the AWA, what's happening inside the AWA in 1984?
Well, it was kind of happening not only in the AWA, it was happening in World Class, it was happening in where Bill Watts promoted, it was happening all over the country. And Vince McMahon, basically what he was doing was picking off talent that all the other promoters developed over the years and all their angles. And he would go in and grab a Hulk Hogan from us. He would grab a who'd he grab from Bill Watts? And he'd grab a Roddy Piper from Don Owens, and he'd grab somebody from Fritz von Erich, somebody from Florida. All their top people, and he'd try to grab them at a point where they were in angles, drawing money, yanking them away, and then coming into your area, trying to get your TV show and look more like the AWA, World Class, or Memphis, or Mid-South than we were. Mm-hmm. And it was frustrating because the promoters at that time, you had Bob Geigel, Don Owens, Fritz von Erich, Bill Watts, Eddie Graham,
Sure.
the Crockett's. All those promoters have huge fricking egos. And to bring them all together was almost impossible to do, but my father, Vern, tried to do it. And we thought it could work. And that was the way to compete against McMahon, mm-hmm. by bringing all this talent together, trying to get a national show, and then going up against him.
Is there a time before that, before you decide to make the concerted effort, that you would just oppose him separately? I mean, and
well, you
say,
tried.
Yeah.
I mean, you tried. I mean, here, I worked for the McMahons for a while, and sitting on the plane with Vince, and he said, you know, my intention was never to put anybody out of business. I said, well, Vince, if that's the case, then why did you come in and steal talent when everybody, since wrestling began, had a handshake, and that was their contract? And, you know, not that that was so bad, but then when you would come into TV stations, that these promoters who got off their asses, flew to San Francisco, got together with a TV station, tough time getting wrestling on, get it on, have it on for 3 years, and finally build the ratings up to where now you can go in and legitimately make money in San Francisco. McMahon come in and hand them $5,000 a week.
Done.
All of a sudden, I tell you, good deal. We're in this meeting in Chicago with all these promoters putting USA Wrestling together. Going to combine the whole thing, or Pro Wrestling USA, okay? And we get a phone call from the TV station in San Francisco. And we have just put out our tapes 4 weeks to San Francisco, sent them all out with all the interviews in, plugging the big match. It was Crusher and, God, I think it was Mad Dog in a cage match out there. Mm-hmm. And we're going to sell out the Cow Palace. And we built this up for 3 years to finally get to that stage. And we get a phone call from this TV station. Vern, hey, Vince McMahon was out here. Now, we had bartered all our time on TV. So we gave him our show. We kept, at that time, 6 minutes, and the TV station had 6 to sell.
Okay.
So we were on for nothing. McMahon just offered me $2,000 to put his show on next week. I mean, we got this big card coming up, and Vern says, well, you know what, we have an agreement. He says, well, Vern, you know what, I can't turn down the money. He said, okay, we'll do $2,500. Okay, you got a deal. So we go back in the meeting, get another phone call. Hey, Vince is up to $3,000. You know, and he came back in and he's telling Watson, fucker, what do we, you know. He says, all right, we'll do $3,500. And that's it. And the guy says, Vern, you got my word, that's it. So we call back to our guys, get all the tapes out there for them, they're going to play them. So now we're going on with the promotion, thinking we're on TV.
Yeah.
Vince had gone over our head, guaranteed him $5,000 a week. They pulled our show off TV without even telling us.
Tell you
All
put
of a
his
sudden
on.
sent the tapes back. I said, so Vince, if you weren't trying to put anybody out of business, why would you do that? He came into Minneapolis to Stu Schwartz, our TV station manager at that time. We'd been on with his father. In Minneapolis, we were locked in. Stu told us he came in with a briefcase, $250,000 in cash, laid it on the table. Take Gagne's off, put me on. He's the only one that turned it down.
Wow.
So he was going around doing that to all the promoters. So here, all the promoters who their life, 20 years on TV in some of these markets,
Yeah.
had built this all up to where our ratings in Minneapolis, Denver, Milwaukee, Chicago, there was only one show nationally that had better ratings than us, 60 Minutes. We had a 25 rating
Oh my God.
with a 62 share.
That's ridiculous. That's
Isn't it?
unbelievable.
And we had that in our markets. And that's what McMahon...
In major cities.
Major cities.
Wow.
And that's what McMahon came in and took from us.
Odd that they would so easily relinquish that. I'm talking about the stations.
Well, some
just
of
for a
them,
little
some
bit
of
of
them
cash.
wouldn't. Some of them wouldn't. But
Yeah.
we had promoters in there too. Like Gene Reed in Denver, he turned them down. They eventually got it because once they got Hogan, they sent him in, and Hogan said, there's a big change in wrestling, and actually, we're going to be more like the AWA than the AWA is.
So they actually used the
They
talent they were
used-
stealing as salesmen.
They used Hogan to
That's
sell
something.
some of this stuff.
I never knew that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I don't think anyone ever knew that. I never heard that before.
No, that's the way it went down.
Wow.
I mean, a lot of people don't know what really went down.
Yeah.
You only hear, the bullshit that's out there.
That's why we're here.
Is that why we're here?
We need DVDs other than the ones Vince puts out. Okay, so all right, so we see the effort that
so you
was the
see
wall
what
we're
he was
slamming
doing.
up against here. So somebody hatches the plan.
So Vern
an effort.
pulled everybody together.
Vern does,
He was him and Jim Barnett were the two that could pull everybody together. And Bill Watts and all those strong personalities. It was really tough to get through what we really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Let's take this Pro Wrestling USA, and we'll shoot it in arenas like McMahon does, and 1 week we'll shoot it in Oklahoma with Bill Watts. The next week we'll move it over to Memphis for Jerry Jarrett. We'll move it to Charlotte with Crockett's.
Yeah.
We'll move it back to St. Paul with us, and that way you're going to get a different look and combine the talent. The problem is what talent you're going to feature on an hour TV show,
Right.
and how do you get them over?
What's the pitch to the talent? What do you tell the guys?
Well, the talent was kind of
Because everyone isn't obviously going to be used anymore. Because now you've got a roster which is being culled from many
you
other.
got the roster
superstars.
right here. I mean, that was it. I mean, look at it.
Yeah, but I mean, 1 hour TV. Somebody's not going
Right.
to be working.
Exactly. There was a lot of them that weren't.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a tough deal. And then you had every promoter. They wouldn't let. If they could have decided on one guy to book it, it could have worked.
Well, what was the plan then? If
Well,
it
that was the plan, but you couldn't do it because, Bill Watts wanted these guys and he wanted this going, and he didn't think that these people should be on. And Jim Crockett had his ideas on who should be on, and let's have Dusty in there, and we'll let Dusty book this thing. Well, Dusty books Dusty. Unfortunately, he's got a great mind for the business, but it revolves around him.
Yeah.
And
So, in this thinking, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yep.
So, in this thinking, where each individual area is going to showcase their TV, you're going to shoot TV in Oklahoma, you're going to shoot some TV in St. Paul, you're going to shoot some TV in Charlotte. Is that individual promoter then, speaking of Vernon, yourself, Crockett, and Watts, are they responsible for building the entire card and showcasing who they want, or is it something where you're all in communication with each other, like, hey, Vern, we're going to put on so-and-so and so-and-so from AWA, send them down?
Well, that's the way it probably, should have gone or should have worked, but
Right.
it didn't.
Right.
they wanted to go into Vince's backyard.
Right.
So they got TV on in New York,
Right.
went into the Meadowlands.
How'd you do that, first of all? Let's getting TV on in New York, first of all.
Well, Vern had a great relationship with WGN in Chicago.
Okay.
He started actually in 1952 on the old DuPont network,
Yeah, sure.
which was eventually going to become WGN.
Right.
And that was the first network wrestling, and him and Jim Barnett kind of ran the whole thing.
Okay. And WGN was the Midwest
It was
powerhouse
the-
for television.
Well, it was. And
Yeah,
now they've
absolutely.
got WPIX in New York.
Right.
They own a station in New Orleans. They own LA, KTLA.
Mhm.
So they had 6 stations. So if you get on with them, you have almost your network right there because you've got New York, Chicago, LA covered. Well, they weren't quite to that point where they would put it on all their stations.
Mhm.
But he's the one that got the with WPIX in New York.
Yes.
And basically that's how we got it on.
Okay.
Okay.
How'd you get into the buildings? Was there any any difficulty?
Well,
because of
there was some.
Yeah.
I mean, McMahon tried to block us in the Meadowlands. He tried to block. I mean, he put us out of St. Paul before our big Thanksgiving card, and we didn't even know it. We'd booked the card. We're doing TV for Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and I call up to get our future dates, and she said, "Well, Greg, you don't have anything on Thanksgiving." I said, "Marlene, this gal that ran the building." I said, "We book it for a year." I mean, what do you mean we don't have Thanksgiving? Well, McMahon came in and offered us a deal we couldn't refuse, and we have to. We're gonna go with them. He's paid all up front for the whole building for the next 3 years.
So you couldn't get any
We
dates?
couldn't get any dates in St. Paul Civic Center.
Is that even legal?
Well, that's another story. We should have probably thrown a suit on him. Some people told us afterwards, I mean, it really was, but,
That's kind of screwed.
My dad, he was such a competitor that he's not going to go that route.
Yeah,
He's going to beat him.
wanted to
himself.
beat him in his own
We'll
game,
We'll
yeah.
beat him with this. We'll
Mhm.
bring everybody together.
So, so now I assume that there are problems that begin to arise with all this cooperation. You've got several promoters working together with all their top talent. This can't go smoothly.
Well, we ran one in Chicago in Comiskey Park, and it went actually pretty well.
Okay.
Except David Crockett, as we're in the locker room, he's going around trying to hire everybody's talent to come with them.
To work exclusively in Charlotte and
In
not no
Charlotte,
longer be
because
part of
now Jim Crockett's got this idea, he's going to compete against McMahon. So Jerry Blackwell, who was, turned into a big star for us, Crockett had him one time, couldn't do anything with him. Now they're trying to hire Jerry Blackwell right out from under us. And about 4 or 5 other pieces of our talent. And some of the Watts' talent. So that was our first show together. And they're trying that. So we said, fuck Crockett, we'll leave him out.
Right.
So then Jerry Jarrett, he sold us a bill of goods on what could be done with his organization. And he's got all these great ideas, and we should do stuff with them. We'll do the next pay-per-view out of Chicago with his group and the Von Erichs. And that was Super Clash,
Okay. Right.
if you remember that.
Sure.
So the idea of that was we'd all book a few matches in there, and then Jarrett would be responsible for paying his people. We'd be responsible for paying our people. Von Erichs would get paid from that. Well, the pay-per-view actually flopped. It did not make any money. Jarrett didn't pay his people and told his people that Vern was supposed to pay him. That's where Jerry Lawler got all pissed off and decided that he was just going to eventually take off with the belt, the AWA belt.
Okay.
So that's how you've heard stories about that whole bullshit.
Yeah,
I listened to
absolutely.
Art JR and Lawler on TV one day, and I was so pissed off because my father never worked with people in the South. And he told me when I started wrestling, I'll never send you down there. I'll send you to Jim Barnett in Atlanta, and that's it. Because all those people, they lie, they cheat, they steal, and you don't want to be around them.
What were the general exceptions
Did
Speaking
that bury him?
speaking of the old school promoters,
Do you guys want me now? Bring me down to that TNA or whatever the fuck you call it down there, Jared.
yeah, I think you just put yourself out of that plane.
Yeah, I don't really care.
But there were a handful of promoters who had the reputation for being honorable with a handshake.
Yeah.
I know Vince Sr., I think, has always talked about it in that respect.
He was, and my father and him were good friends.
Yeah.
And when Vince went on HBO, my father called him. He said, "Vince, what are you doing? You're going to fuck up the wrestling." "No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Here's what we're going to do. Send us tapes of your guys, and we'll put them on, and then we can book these guys in the garden and
Yeah.
around our area here."
Yeah.
Well, all they were doing is we're feeding them, getting our talent over so he could take it.
So eventually he's priming the market
Right.
so that when your guys came over, yeah.
But Vince Sr. and my father did have a real good relationship.
Right.
And always did. Bill Watts and my father had a good relationship, but you know there was a story there in Oklahoma that my father helped get that thing going, and there was three partners: Fritz, Von Erich, Vern, and Bill Watts, and Bill got to him a little bit, so they broke that relation up.
Bill got to a lot of people.
Bill got to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I love Bill to death, but he got him.
Yeah.
So they just broke off the relationship.